Welcome to my kitchen. My name's Amanda, and today we are going to be making apple fig jam. It is so tasty. It's my favorite. The kids really love it. It's literally like having fall in a jar. It's so tasty. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to be doing the water bath method with it. All right, let's go ahead and can. For this recipe, you're going to need 220 figs, 8 apples, cinnamon, vanilla, and also lemon juice. It's definitely one of those mornings I need a cup of coffee. It's rainy. The kids are going to be building a fort in the living room. They're really excited because it's another rainy day and they get to tear apart the cushions and make a really neat fort. So I have 220 figs here. I definitely doubled this recipe because I have a lot of figs that I've been pulling from the tree, and I'm using a large pot for this. So we're going to cut the figs all in half and double check to make sure that the inside of the figs all look perfect. Nothing's wrong with them. There aren't any bad figs. And again, just cutting them in half, and I'm going to go ahead and throw them right into the pot. We are going to be using the immersion blender for this one because I like when it's a little chunky for this type of jam. I will put the ingredients in the description box down below so that way you will know how much for the measurements. And I am doubling this recipe because I do have a lot of figs. So I will put in the description box as well for if you're not doubling it, for how many apples you need, how much vanilla, lemon juice, all that. I will definitely put that in the description box. I am using a fairly large pot because there is quite a bit and I don't want it to splatter everywhere. So just keep cutting up all the figs in half and double checking them all. When I pick my figs from the tree, I try to make sure I can leave the stems on if I can, if it pulls off easily. I try to like pinch it. I always wear gloves when I pick figs too because of the sap. It can really burn, especially underneath the fingernails when you're pinching the stems to get the figs off the fig tree. I find when I do leave the stems on the figs, it does help make them last a little bit longer in the refrigerator. So that way I have enough time between picking and also canning up the jams. So it definitely really helps when the stems are on. I know right now it does look completely full with the figs going into the pot, and then I'll have to add 8 apples. But once you get all your ingredients in and you turn it on and you start using the immersion blender, it does reduce down. So I know right now I'm just filling this up as much as I can. And, I am using a lot of figs, but I've definitely over the past 4 years, I have really worked on this recipe of how I like it and how my kids like it. So I am really happy with how it has turned out for the past 2 years of what we have been adding into this recipe. In this recipe, I do not use pectin. It gives a nice consistency when you add the apples into this recipe, and it makes it fairly nice and thick. And I really love to use this jam when I go to bake and I make apple fig muffins. I do have a video on that, on how I make the apple fig muffins using this jam in it, and it is so tasty. I've made it gluten-free and I've also made it wheat. I sadly cannot eat the wheat. I'm gluten-free, so I eat the gluten-free apple fig muffins, and they're really tasty, and they freeze well too in the freezer for a good up to 3 months in the freezer. For the apples, I am using Pink Lady apple. It is one of our favorites we like to eat in the house, so I like including that into this recipe. I have tried other apples. You can use other apples if you'd like to, but my family prefers the Pink Lady apples. They're really sweet and juicy, and you're going to want to remove all the skin from the apple so that way it doesn't give any tough chunks in it when you do the immersion blender, because sometimes you will get chunks of apples and chunks of figs in this recipe with the immersion blender, and that's fine because we like this one a little bit chunkier and thicker. So you're going to want to remove all the skin from all the apples, and then once you get all the skin removed, you're going to want to cut them up into bite sizes and throw them into the big pot. I got the Pink Lady apples from Costco, and they are really nice size apples from Costco. I also got another bag from Walmart, and the Pink Lady apples were a lot smaller. Those ones were great for my daughter to personally eat because she likes to eat an apple but sometimes can't finish these giant ones. So the ones from Walmart were perfect size for kids if they just want to eat an apple as is, wash it up, not peel it or anything like that, or slice it up. But these ones were perfect. I liked the size. They were a good handful size that I got from Costco. They're beautiful. I want to say it was 4 pounds for $6.99, and they are beautiful. My son likes to eat these right out of the jar, so I like to use the half pint jars when I can these up. There is a coconut fig square bars that I like to make, and you can use this jam in it or the vanilla brown sugar jam or even the raspberry fig jam too. You can just replace it whichever fig jam you would like to use in that recipe, but they're all really tasty in it, and it's so good. They don't last long. It's super easy. You can make it gluten-free or you can make it of regular just with wheat and use regular oatmeal, and it's still, my family likes it. I sadly can't eat that one, but I really like the gluten-free ones because I can definitely eat them, but they are really tasty. There is a video on that on how to make those. The apple fig jam is really tasty over yogurt. I love putting it over the vanilla yogurt or just the plain Greek yogurt, but it is perfect, especially when you have a sweet tooth at night and you don't want to get like a whole, big bowl of ice cream, but you just want to settle that craving for something sweet and delicious. This is just perfect for a snack at night for like a dessert. It's really good. It's also perfect over a nice warm bowl of oatmeal for breakfast. Really yummy instead of just always putting it over toast. Now that our apples and our figs are all cut up, you're going to need 8 tablespoons of lemon juice. Now you need 4 tablespoons of vanilla extract. Okay, you're now going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. I find that I like to add more sometimes, but I won't add more until I have completely blended all this together. Once I have blended down the figs and the apples, then I will taste it and see if I feel that it needs more cinnamon, and then that's when I will add more. And you can add more to your liking. Sometimes I like it a little bit more cinnamon flavor and stronger. Now you're going to add 1 cup of brown sugar. Add 1 cup of water because it is kind of thick when you blend it down with the apples, and this water will definitely help. So you're going to go ahead and turn the stove to medium heat, and we're going to go ahead and use the immersion blender. And you can use the immersion blender to get the consistency that you would like your jam to be. I try to make this consistency to the liking of how my kids like it, so I use the immersion blender quite a bit for this. It is still nice and thick. I like when there are some chunks here and there, but they don't like when there's like big chunks of the fig in it because they will pull that out. So I'm perfectly fine if there are minimal chunks to it. If I was to blend this up in a blender, it would become a really nice smooth consistency, almost like a fine pureed applesauce. So I like to use the immersion blender for this jam because it does make it thicker. It's smooth, but it's not like a blended up puree. It is a nice consistency, and you can make it to the texture you want it to be. And again, I don't use any pectin, and it does can up very nicely. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can use a blender and blend it up to the consistency you want by doing the pulsing, or you could take a potato masher and just mash it while it's cooking at the medium heat, but you definitely would have to really keep an eye on it and really, stir it because you don't want it burn on the bottom. Now that I have it blended up to the consistency I like, I'm going to keep stirring it at the medium heat, and you want it to come to a nice bubble. I am filling chunks of apples and figs in it as well, and if there's too big of a chunk that I don't like, I will take the immersion blender to it again. Here is a chunk, so I'm going to take the immersion blender to it again because it's a really big chunk. I am okay with minimal chunks in it, but I try to make sure that there aren't big chunks because my kids then will nitpick out the big chunks, and I really want them to eat this. Figs are healthy, and we have a lot, and I definitely want to try to utilize what we can with what we grow. So I'm definitely going to take the immersion blender to it again and try to get it a little bit smoother with the chunks. But again, there are little tiny chunks, but the big ones, like that big giant fig I just showed you, I try to reduce those down. My daughter loves to eat the figs right off the tree. My middle son, he likes to eat it in a jam form. That's why I try to reduce the giant chunks of figs because I really want him to eat it too.
I found a few more big chunks of fig, so I took the immersion blender to it one more time, and now I'm just going to keep stirring it. Once it does come to a bubble, that's when you want to constantly stir for 7 minutes.
Okay, it's starting to bubble. We're gonna go ahead and stir it for the 7 minutes. So the timer for 7 minutes. Stir constantly.
You can see that it is bubbling, so you definitely want to keep stirring constantly so you don't have any more bubbles so it doesn't burn on the bottom. But I love using a spatula with a flat edge, so that way you can really scrape along the bottom to make sure you have nothing sticking to it. Now that it's been cooking for a while and the flavors are all mixed well together, I definitely want to give it a taste and see if I want to add any more cinnamon to it. And it tasted really good, but I felt like it needed a little bit more cinnamon, and I wanted to ask my kids' opinion too if they wanted more cinnamon. But it is still really good, but that's why I like to see if I want to add more. So definitely, go by your judgment of how much cinnamon you want to add to it.
I added 2 more tablespoons of cinnamon. I tasted it and it was really good, but I also had my daughter taste it. But we thought it needed a little bit more cinnamon. So you can always add more cinnamon if you feel that you need a little bit more to it. So I added 2 more tablespoons of cinnamon to it. And I'm just going to keep stirring it in until the cinnamon dissolves completely into it. And I'll show you what it looks like right now. But we're still in the 7 minutes of constantly stirring. Okay, so my 7-minute timer just went off, and we're gonna go ahead and turn the stove to low, and we're gonna stir it periodically here and there for 30 minutes. So we're gonna set our timer for 30 minutes, and I'm gonna go ahead and retest it again to see if it's the flavor we want for how much cinnamon, because we do like this one a little bit more with cinnamon. That's better, a lot better. So you can always add more cinnamon in to give it more of a cinnamony taste if you like a lot of cinnamon. So you can definitely, put how much you want in for that. All right, so I'm gonna set the timer for 30 minutes and stir periodically, and I'll start getting my station set up.
Here's how I have everything set up so far right now. My jars are in the dishwasher and they're just finishing up right now as we are stirring the jam. It looks really good. I like the texture of it, and I have minimal chunks to it, which is how I want it to be. And it's nice and thick. I have my water ready for my lids. My big pot is filled with water. My 30-minute timer just went off, so the jam is ready. My jars are all nicely washed up and set to go. So now we're going to just go ahead and start canning up our jam, and I'm going to move the pot over to the side so that way I have it closer to the jars when I go to put the jam in the jars. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my water started, getting it to a boil, because it does take a while. So I'm going to get my pot on my burner, and I'm going to go ahead and put the water onto high. Since I used a lot of figs for this recipe, I always make sure that I have quite a bit of jars ready, so that way I have what I need. It's better to have more than less, and that way you're just ready to roll with it and just can everything up. And I really love using a measuring cup. That way I can just scoop it and pour it into the funnel. It makes it really easy, and you want to leave a 1/4 inch headspace in each jar so that way it properly seals. I like having a towel under the jar so that way when I do put the jam into the jars, if anything spills out, I can easily just move the towel and it easily cleans up. And I will definitely replace the towel before I put all the new hot jars on top, so that way it has something to really rest on for those 24 hours that the jars sit on the counter. Now that I have all my jam in my jars, I'm going to go ahead and put my water that's in my measuring cup in the microwave, and I'm going to heat it up for 3 minutes. And then while that's going on, I'm going to go ahead and measure all my jams to make sure that I have a 1/4 inch headspace in all the jars. And this is where I kind of like play, we're equaling it out. Like I'll have some extra jam left over, and some jars may need more, some jars may need less. And this is where I get my final count for how many jars I actually have. My water is done, it's heated up, so I'm going to go ahead and take 24 lids and put them in the water, and I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes. That way I know that they are good and ready to go. And then I'm going to continue checking all my jars for any air bubbles. And if you have any air bubbles, you're just going to take your knife and then just pop the air bubble and kind of move it around, so that way there is no longer an air bubble and all you see is just jam. And then you can also take the jar of jam and kind of like tap it on the counter, so that way it'll make the jam completely flat on the top, so when you go to can it. Also gives a better reading too when you're measuring for your 1/4 inch headspace. Now that all my jars are 1/4 inch headspace and there's no more air bubbles in them, I'm going to go ahead and wipe them down with water, and then I like to take the other end of the paper towel and then dry them down. So that way they are all ready to go, and I'm going to do this for all 24 jars. You want to make sure that you definitely clean them very well, that there's no jam on the outside, because you don't want to mess up the seal when canning them. So definitely make sure there's no jam and nothing sticky. Okay, now that the jar's rims have all been wiped down and there's no more jam or anything sticky on it, we're going to go ahead and take the lid and we're going to put it on top with the ring as well on top of it. And we're going to go ahead and just do like a finger tight. We're not going to do like a hand tight grip. You just want to just tighten it, not super tight. So we're going to do this for all the jars. I know it seems like a lot of steps when it comes to canning, doing the water bath method, but it's definitely well worth it in the long run. It's homemade, it's something you've made, and you know what's going in it, so it's definitely worth it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you feel comfortable doing it, and you learn a lot too as you go. All my jars are done and ready to go. My water has come to a really nice boil, and on the bottom of my pot I actually have a cake cooling rack, and it has little feet on the bottom, so that way my jars aren't sitting directly on the bottom of the pot. I have 24 jars total to can doing the water bath method. I'm going to go ahead and place 7 jars in for the first round, and once you get the jars in, you're going to want to close the lid and then bring the water back to a boil. Once you have it back to a boil, you're going to want to set your timer for 10 minutes.
My 10-minute timer just went off, so we're going to go ahead and turn the stove off, and we're going to remove the lid and set the timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll take them out. Okay, so my 5-minute timer just went off. I'm going to go ahead and remove the jars, and once I get them removed, then I'm going to go ahead and turn the water back on to high.
Once you get your jars to your counter, you're going to want to let it sit for 24 hours. Do not move them, and you're going to start hearing them pop, which is definitely a great sign. When you hear them pop, you definitely know they have properly sealed.
Okay, so now that I have those jars out, we're going to go ahead and turn the water back up to high. I'm going to put my lid back on. So I put my lid back on, so that way it'll help speed up the process to get this water back to a nice boil. And once it's back to a boil, then I'm going to put the next jars in, and I'm going to keep repeating the process. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I hope you guys try this recipe if you have fig trees or have a lot of figs. But this made a total of 24 half-pint jars, and it is really tasty. It is so good. My kids absolutely love it. And thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, guys.